Welcome to the Built on Air podcast. We are in our final episode of this season 19. Good to be with you all. Myself, Camille, and Ali back, and we have returning guest Jen Rudd. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good to have you back. We'll get caught up with Jen a little bit later in the show. I'll walk us through what we're going to be talking about. We'll first start with our Around the Bases and keep you up to date on everything new and exciting going on with Airtable. Then highlight our sponsor, OnToAir and OnToAir Backups. And then Jen's going to walk us through a demo of using Formstack and using that. And then Camille is going to walk us through the new confirmation modals. And then shout out to join our community, and then we'll wrap up with the new synced linked records with Ali. So with that, around the bases, let's see what's going on. Checking out the what's new page to start. Confirmation modals to interface buttons. That's what Camille's going to walk us through. So that was the only new one posted on the what's new since the last time we talked about it, but there was a couple, at least one other thing Max for him said was delete records and copy link to record actions plus require confirmation, which is what we're going to be talking about. So these are inside the button drop down of the actions that you can do, along with the other ones of going to a link and performing an automation, things like that. Mm-hmm. But looks like Camille, delete records, that's been there for a while.
It has for me. Sometimes it's difficult to tell for me how long a feature's been available publicly versus just on enterprise plans, but I have been able to delete records from a button for a while. But copy link to record, I personally haven't seen before.
It's been there maybe like, I want to say 6 months to a year, but
well,
I almost forget about it because I honestly don't find it useful. I would really love to have copy a value in a field as an option and point it at a field. That would be very useful.
Yeah.
So that puts it like on your clipboard, the URL to that page.
Yeah.
Record. Gotcha.
And with side sheets, the URL is often like encoded. So like it ends up being quite long, depending on like what page you're on and how many things you've clicked on previously. So I could see that definitely being useful. Obviously, delete record has been useful. And then now that you can have a confirmation modal, it's, even more useful in that you don't like delete stuff willy-nilly. You can have a little bit more of a stopgap for accidental deletions.
Yeah, gotcha. And there was some discussion on what plans it was available for. This one is available on all plans. So Josh was excited about that. Okay, and we'll dive deeper into the confirmation modals. All right, next one from Ben Green in the Facebook community. Nice discussion. What do you wish Airtable would change? He'll go first. His was add link records in a sub form. So if you have a new company form and want a sub form to add contacts.
Yes, having that conversation constantly of being able to add child records in a form.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that would be nice. Any others in here? I don't know if you guys went through this.
I like Ben Bailey's response a little bit up. He said intra-table reciprocal linking. So if you have a people table and you link a person to their manager who is another person, Airtable isn't going to create the reverse field like it would if you were linking between tables. It would be so useful if it did. I, to this day, am confused why they never implemented it. It just seems like they're like, we don't need that. We do, though.
Yep.
I wrote a script that does that, like in the early days, like when the scripting first came out, and I still get inquiries about using that. And that was like 5 years ago.
I also did the same. It's definitely something I wish they would fix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? What's on your top of the list?
For
Editing.
sure.
What?
Editing records via forms.
Yeah. That, and then I really perhaps one of my top ones is what Chris Dancy wrote. If you scroll up a little bit more, auto sort linked record setting. That would be incredible. Seems like pretty simple. They could just put in a little toggle, field to sort by. That would be lovely. I did demo a script to get around that on this show, like probably over a year ago. I linked to it in the replies to Chris's comment. But
yeah, I wonder 500 isn't enough fields. Do you ever run into that? I don't run into that limit.
I have experienced running into that limit once, and it was a very poorly designed table. I worry that you are routinely needing more than 500 records per table. That to me suggests that perhaps your database would be better served if it were more vertical than horizontal. But then you get into Airtable does have record limits as well. I would love to have more records, just generally speaking. I think a lot of the hard limits, X number of automations, I think it's 50. X number of records, depending on what plan you're on. Those I would like an increase on, but not fields, not for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've run into that in a base where there was like 60 people and they were all adding fields all willy-nilly and didn't know what they were doing, and gotta reel it back in. But yeah, I think you could benefit from reworking your structure if you're running into that limit often.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Sally,
commented.
what did you put?
Yeah, I wrote. I mentioned it in our last episode. I would love to be able to access, kind of like you can in a view in the data layer of the base. You can say suck up all the records on this view. I'd love to be able to have that as like a user specific option in the interfaces. So if somebody clicks a button on a list view or list layout rather, that's like filtered a certain way, and they want to send an email to everyone they see on their screen, I'd want to be able to do that. Like there's really the only way to simulate that now is like by giving the user a checkbox field, but then it's like, do you give everybody their own? Because the people could step over each other, and then that's just not scalable. So I'd love to be able to access how the user has it currently configured on their screen, so you can, more personalized automations.
I agree. I think generally kind of expanding on that right now, an automation can be tied to a particular record. You click a button on this record and it'll fire an automation with that as its trigger. I would love if we could fire it based on a list or an array of records rather, and just have the trigger effectively be a find record step where whatever view I'm looking at, here are the records, immediately punt me into a repeat step or something like that, because there's so many use cases where I want to email myself this list, or I want to send this list to some other API, or I want to summarize this list in some way, and you have to do a bunch of extra steps if you want to do that.
It's like when you're in Wave and you want to accept a bunch of transactions that you've already coded. You just press a button and it just loops through all those records.
Yep.
Yep. Here's mine right here. Use extensions and interfaces.
Yep.
Especially the scripting block would be nice, since the 30-second time limit in automations doesn't always pass muster.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are quite a few basic Airtable made extensions that I would love if they formalized as part of their product. Like the CSV import I use all the time now. And although you can directly import a CSV on a table, the CSV extension allows you to merge records, which is very useful. And you get to map which field is what. It's a very simple extension. It's one of the oldest ones, but it's actually pretty nice. And you can't do it from an interface. And I would love if you could, but you can't.
Yeah.
All right, the list is very long. Yeah, there's another request from Fill Out founder Dominic.
I'm happy to say that it seems like they've made a lot of movement in the past year or so to like kind of check off a lot of the ones that people have been asking for a long time, like synced link records and dynamic filtering. Those have been like day one requests, so I'm really excited about what's to come.
Yeah. Yep. Very good. Well, add yours to the list and see if hopefully Airtable is looking and adding to their roadmap. Okay, here's a cool one posted in the Airtable community from Shamil. Basically built a football manager, football club simulator, and actually opened it up for people to join. So if you want to see like a live use case built in Airtable, I always like to see live demos. That is a nice one. Shout out to Shamil. And if you want to manage your football team, you can join here and do so. And football is soccer. This is soccer. Just so everyone's on the same page.
Love it.
All right. Okay, Julian posts an interesting discussion on LinkedIn. So explored many Airtable alternatives. I choose to stick with Airtable. Here's why. He gives his explanation. I like the meme here. This is a popular meme going around. Stop using Airtable or draw 25. And he's got a full deck. So he's continues to draw and stay with Airtable.
Excellent.
Yep. So it is every once in a while we look at competitors, but keep coming back to Airtable.
Agreed.
All right, next one. This is from Airtable. Looks like the marketing team got together and posted a couple pictures. So if you want to know who on the marketing team, see your face. There's a couple pictures there. Okay, moving to X. Airtable is an incredible tool, Ryan Hildebrandt says, in the right hands. With the wrong tables, fields, etc., it may as well be a pretty Google sheet. With the right setup, it can 10x the capacity of your business. And says previously, 99% of Airtable setups are crap and cap your business around 50 to 100K max. If the term foreign key, relational database, and user story don't sound familiar, you may be a victim. Don't know about that. I've seen many people use it well. But basically, this is also different. His use case of like trying to run your business on it, if you're like an entrepreneur, is kind of a different use case than what a lot of people do to just manage their internal workflows in a corporate setting.
Yeah, I think that's just two different avatars of people using Airtable. There's the I want to replace 5 or 6 admins with Airtable versus somebody who's trying to run a couple marketing team workflows directly in Airtable. So it's totally different animals.
Yeah.
I have seen a little bit of both, and I've seen great Airtables built by, lay people in either sense. I'm trying to run my whole business, or I'm just trying to run this, small little operation, perhaps even for like a hobby, not even business related at all. And sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're pretty sprawling. There's a lot of Google Sheet syndrome where that's what you're familiar with, and so you attempt to replicate what you've built in a different platform rather than adjusting what you're trying to build for the platform you're currently in. But you don't know how to do that until you know the platform, right? So I think with time, anybody can get a system that works for them and kind of works within the limits. If you can afford whatever plan Airtable is offering for you. But yeah, there's at least a little bit of a learning curve, I think, for adapting to how do you work in an Airtable like environment that's not Google Sheets.
Yeah.
And I think like trying to rebuild whatever software you were in before is like the worst way of trying to get into it, just because it's just garbage in and garbage out. If that software was working for you, then why are you leaving? Other than just shiny app syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, next one. This is a little bit more humor. Startups are awesome. Feels so good to close a $100,000 deal. Then after paying for AWS, Stripe, everything, Airtable is included in this list, you're left with a whole $77 left over. Software can get expensive. Although you might not need all of that. Probably 95% of that is AWS, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm. This is a perfect time for me to shout out Outseta again. The platform I use to run my business, they handle, of this list, they handle what Zendesk does, Stripe, and technically Zapier. If you think about it, they do a lot for, I think, a very reasonable price. If you have a subscription-based model, I highly recommend them. They're great.
Good shout out there.
And MailChimp. They do emailing as well. You could do email campaigns. They're great. Love them.
Yep. Okay, next one. It's a good reminder. Justin learned maybe the hard way. There is an automation limit of 50 automations per base. It says it's time to rework some automations when he gets time. Ran up against the limit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good reminder.
That's a fun one.
And there's no, is there like a not an alert, but anything on the UI that tells you you're at 49 out of 50 automations? That's the limit for everybody, every plan. Just put it on the screen so people aren't surprised when they suddenly run out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't know, that's the limit.
I also wish you could just do a search, like for automation. Like you can use Control F, like that will work, but like it would be great to just have a little search bar, not just for automation, but for your run history as well. That would be.
That's what, I was trying to figure out. I knew there was an automation that did something, but I couldn't remember what it was named. And I had a list of automations. I wish I could see it, but I knew that it had just run. And I want to see all the run history across all of them instead of going to each one.
Yeah.
So then I could have been like, okay, this is the one it came from because it just ran.
I am really appreciative of the new little small gray text underneath each automation that tells you how many runs it's done this month so far. That's been really helpful just to get for where you're at. I like that.
Yeah, that is good. So sorry, Justin, you ran into that, but usually you can optimize, you can combine, especially with the new branching. You could potentially combine automations. So that's an option there.
Yeah.
Okay, next one from Greg. If you use Webflow and you're looking to use Airtable as kind of your data source, but Webflow for your CMS, you can sync that. It does require a third-party tool called WhaleSync that's been on our show in the past. So here's a quick 3-minute tutorial that walks you through how you can get that all set up. So that's a good use case. And speaking of WhaleSync, just a shout out to them. Looks like they added a new connector, Copper, which is a CRM, Copper CRM. I'm assuming that's the one it is, Copper Inc.
Yeah.
So if you want to sync between Airtable and other tools, WhaleSync is a good solution there.
Excellent. I've been seeing a lot of ads for Copper recently.
I looked at it like in 2020. It was similar to HubSpot. I haven't looked at it since. So
it's built inside of Gmail, so it's kind of incorporated with Google. So it's basically a CRM on top of Gmail.
Yeah.
All right. Couple more from the, speaking of syncing, looks like here's a new entrance, SyncGrip. So right now it looks like just Airtable and Asana with plans to add more. So if that's a use case, you want to try out a new tool, they just posted a showcase in our community. So syncgrip.com. Looks like that will be a new competitor in this space. Okay, last one. This one I thought was kind of funny. So this was from Carlston. So kind of comparing Excel, what happens if you type in like a 10.5, it converts it to a timestamp or a date. And then if you see here, I did the Airtable version. I don't know if people will. This is still a bug, right? Where it's like, if you do math, it's not exactly like it adds this very long decimal value to the end of it for some weird reason. They've got a floating point bug that's been there from day one.
It's in Excel as well. It's frustrating. Yeah, you could add 12 and 0.5 and it's gonna exactly what Dan put there.
Yeah,
give you a long trailing decimal.
Yeah, which is the pain, because if you try to compare like that value with like, if it's equal to 12.5, do this, and it won't be equal. Like you'll just see some bizarre behavior.
Hmm.
So you have to round it before you try doing math, just in case you try to mess it up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. We've run into that. I think we talked to Airtable about it, and I don't think there's any plans to fix it. Maybe it's an inherent computer issue. I don't know.
I think it has to do with, this is way over my head, but when I first ran into this in Excel and I was like, how does a computer get math wrong? I was like, how does it think 1 + 1 is 2.0003? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. And I don't have a degree in computer science, so I wish I did, but my very rudimentary understanding is it has something to do with binary, and it's a 0 becoming a 1 somewhere under the hood, and it messes stuff up.
I do have a degree in computer science, and I still don't know.
I almost got a degree in computer science.
Yeah.
I'm considering getting an MCS.
Well, there you have it, folks. The full range.
Yes.
My husband's getting an MSCS because he's bored, but I'm considering MSCS. Yeah. He has too many degrees.
Yeah. I had one more. All right, that concludes our round the bases. Now you know everything going on in Airtable and you're up to date. If you are running your business on Airtable, best practice and industry standard is to make sure your data is stored outside of Airtable itself. That's where OnToAir comes in. You can store it to Box, Dropbox, and Google Drive, and soon to come OneDrive. That should be coming out in a week or two. And we just released our restore functionality, so you can now restore your backups back into Airtable. And that has not been fully announced. It's still working out a couple kinks, but that is available to all OnToAir customers for now. So try it out at ontoair.com. Okay, Jen, you want to share your screen?
Yeah, give me one.
Through Formstack.
Screen's over. Okay. We go over here. Presents. Share screen. Window. Entire screen. Sorry. Switching back and forth between computers all day. Okay.
There you go.
All right. So you see the chaos that's going on here. Okay. Okay. So we are also a partner of Formstack. We've been working with Formstack for quite a few years now. And what we like a lot from Formstack is the ability to create documents from Airtable information. But recently, Formstack asked us to kind of prepare a demo for them, for a potential customer, to kind of show the full range of like a form intake into Airtable, generate a document, and send it for signature. So I wanted to show that first step, like what that looks like from the client perspective, but then also show some of the behind the scenes of how Formstack works and some of the cool things. I was just Ali was talking this week about trying to find a way to create documents and contracts from Airtable, and wanted to show Formstack as an option. So here, first we have a simple form in Formstack. One thing I like about Formstack forms versus Airtable is that you can calculate information directly in the form. So Airtable doesn't do calculations until the information's at rest. So third-party tools like Formstack allow you to do calculations and kind of clean up data before it goes into Airtable, which is one of the features. And then also display information to somebody who's filling in the form. So like if they put in a dollar figure and you want them to fill in more information because that dollar figure is over a certain amount, something like Formstack will do that, whereas Airtable, because it's not calculating, because the information is not at rest, you have to wait till it's submitted before you can say, hey, we need more information. So super simple in this, just to show you some conditional logic. And the forms here, because it's an individual, we're asking for a first name and last name. And then I'm going to put in and then here I'll put my email address in. You can also do file uploads. But then once this form is submitted, do this correctly, it should show up in Airtable almost immediately. There it is. Okay. And so
you need to use Zapier or Make for that, or does it automatically go to Airtable?
It goes directly to Airtable, and I can show you that part. So here we have in Formstack, I can show the module in Formstack. You can send information into a webhook,
gotcha,
and then it comes through as a JSON with nested values and so forth.
Cool.
So then I didn't put the file in here, but it basically creates a record in the file table, and then also creates a secondary record in another table. So that child record relationship you can kind of create or simulate in Formstack. And then so here you'll see that that entry came in almost instantaneously. And then it creates the address and so forth. And then it also creates the client file at the same time. So the person fills in one form and you get a linked record relationship. And then here, I'm going to show you what the document looks like. With Formstack, you can use either build a document directly in their document module, or you can just upload a Word document, and you can even do like if-then statements, like if this information is there, put in this information in the document. So you're able to create like a complete merge document, not just have like one document per decision tree of information. So here we have a document that just says like, when I send the information from Airtable, fill in these fields. And so I'll do that. Here, I'm just going to put in a transaction date and interest rate. I'm sure it's higher than that. And then I just put in some information into a document that I found on the internet. And so what I want to do is when I click this button, right now it's both creates the document and shows it in here, and it also sends it out to the client for signature ostensibly. What you could do is also have a two-step process where it generates a document first, you check it to make sure, and then maybe have another action for the user to send that for a signature. But I just flattened it for the sake of information. And then what you'll see here is that Airtable is going to receive the document merged. So all that information I just put in shows up in the form and the document, and it's a multi-page document. And in the meantime, I also got a request as the person's email address to sign the document. And then here we just use merge tags again, but we have a merge field, which is for the signature block, and it's just whited out so you can't see where that merge tag is. And then you can submit it. You can also grab like the finished document and add it back to the file. But what I do like about Formstack too is it gives you the validation of the signatures. So it's like this signature here, but it also gives you a completion certificate, which is nice.
Absolutely.
And then so automation is Formstack sends the information from the web into a webhook. And then this is a button click. And basically you'll see there's a lot of transformation because you want to make sure that the transaction amount prints correctly. So it's that pretty prints formula that I don't even know who did that, but I still love them every day for that one. And like we concatenated the address into one field and so forth. And then basically you ingest all the information from that record where the button's created. And then you have the URL for the document. And then you just set up your API key and secret in Formstack. And then you just send the web URL parameters that you're grabbing from Airtable. And then it will create that document. And then you also get a webhook of that final document, including like what you sent there. So like you can find the record ID and like send it, update it here. I'm sure you can also just wait for the response from Formstack, but this was a quick demo. So I can show some of the behind the scenes too.
Yeah.
Formstack. I was just in here.
Trying to remember so they acquired the document solution from somebody.
Yeah, it's something else.
WebMerge, that's right.
Yeah, WebMerge is like you see some of the URLs are from WebMerge, but like here with the form builder, file intake, and then in the settings, you can set like the actions to send a notification email, and then also send to webhook here, and then documents. Here you can kind of like manage the file. It gives you the most complete version. You can upload new files. I just use the Word doc just because people like formatting and things like that. And then you can set delivery. So like it's 2 steps where you first make the merge and then you make the delivery. So
Nice.
Yeah. Formstack is extremely powerful.
Because I know people get sticker shock from it, but like actually the fact that you can do all of this without having to get a secondary contracting platform and things like that, and the fact that you can send all that nested information into Airtable and then just use Airtable automations to do all of it. There's also workflows. I haven't really played with workflows in Formstack just because Airtable is like our data store and data transformation for the most part, but it's a pretty cool tool.
I did they have that data routing tool is really, really powerful. I have a use case where we've got like we want to generate like a packet of like benefits information, and depending on certain things like whether the employee is full-time or part-time, they get certain pages added and certain pages not added. And we actually have in Airtable all the pages that would be possibly added, and this can go and like suck them up from Airtable and then add the individual pages, like just depending on certain conditions. It's so cool. Very powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like happens a lot in a lot of different settings, from like, employee benefits, from like loan documentation and things like that, when there's just so many. Like I remember when in California, like the different disclosures for the California real estate packet was just insane. So if you know what combination of things, you can generate pretty comprehensive documentation.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Jen. And we didn't get a chance to, you've been on the show a few times. Give us an update on who you are and what you've been up to.
definitely. So yeah, we're a consulting firm for Airtable. We're an Airtable Gold Services partner. We've been in business since 2011, so 13 years, consulting on Airtable since 2018. Work with a lot of like complex builds for enterprise customers and sometimes SMBs that just need a lot of scripting, a lot of integration with other tools, and kind of make Airtable their data convergence and kind of place for their team to work. So, but we have about 11 team members in total, and just been growing over the last couple of years, which has been great.
Yep, very good. People can find you at your website.
Yes, redconsulting.io.
Redconsulting.io. Thank you, Jen.
Absolutely.
Good. Always good to have you back on. Okay, let's move on. Interfaces, new confirmation modals with Camille. There you go.
All right. Well, as we had just seen, confirmation modals are a relatively new addition for Airtable interfaces. And after doing a little bit of testing, I've seen it's pretty consistently implemented across buttons in the newer interfaces. So if I open up an individual detail page for a record, I have some buttons here. And then a button up at the top of this gallery view. Both of those can have the confirmation modal attached. So it's a fairly straightforward feature. So I'll just go to one of these that doesn't have a defined status to it. And there's basically 3 buttons that I have. I still wish Airtable would allow me to show more than 2 buttons at a time, but alas. So really what I could do is click on any one button. Let's say I want to hire this person. And this is the default messaging that comes with this particular button action. Are you sure you're making updates to this record? Very generic, but you can customize this text. If the action were to go to a different URL, what the default text is something like, are you sure you will be redirected to, and then whatever address it is as the default. Your options are cancel and yes, continue. You can customize this text, yes, continue, but you can't customize the cancel text, which is to me all right. But each button can be controlled individually for what its text does and then whether or not this button has a confirmation modal to begin with. And then for an example of some customized text for this button up here, I said what this button will do is it'll actually take you to our form to join our Slack community. So I said, are you sure? You should be. It's a welcoming, useful Slack community that will keep you up to date on all things Airtable. And then for the confirmation, I said, let's get it rather than yes. So yeah, you can put a decent amount of text in the confirmation modal. If I click on this button, you'll see a new toggle under action. It says require confirmation, and that's where you can customize the title itself. So go to form, for instance, and if I were to click on it now, go to form would be up here. And then this is where you would customize your message. I have tested, it is not markdown friendly. So if I do entering a couple carriage returns and then putting it in wrapped in asterisks, and then now we're to look at it, it gets rid of any carriage returns and does not format this in markdown. That's just something to keep in mind. But that is basically the feature. I think it's fairly useful. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier on the show, but one of the button actions is to delete a record. So if I create a new button really quickly, button, I'm going to call this delete. And then if I set this to delete record, require confirmation is on by default. And it looks like you actually can't turn it off for delete record, which is interesting. Feel like I would want that to be toggleable because, you know, if I'm an admin, for instance, I know when I want to delete something. So clicking delete, the default text is this will delete the record. So Airtable is pretty thoughtful in what the default text is for each of these each of the different actions that you could select for a button. This is petty, but are you sure feels passive aggressive. So
it's funny too, but if you like delete in like a list view, it's not like that clicky. You can just delete it pretty quickly. So
yeah. So yeah, I feel like it would be great if you didn't have to have this on. I believe, yeah, that's the only action that you must have the button or the confirmation being on, though.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder. It's probably a year or two ago when the delete. Well, I guess that was for deleting a field. They didn't have a confirmation on that, and there was quite a big backlash. So
yeah. I think in a grid or a list, it's pretty easy to delete something by accident. This, less so. It feels more deliberate. I like having the ability to have a confirmation modal. I don't know if I necessarily always need it, however. But a pretty sort of powerful move you could do is also to couple confirmation modals with visibility rules. So you can say, if this is my record, if I'm assigned to it, then show me the ability to delete using the visibility options here. And if it's not my record, don't even give me the button to click on in the first place. And then the same thing with all of the other options as well. You can have very similar buttons set up with different confirmation messages that are visible based on, a status field, for instance.
Cool. Very useful tool coming in handy. All right, let's move on. Ali, walk us. Oh, first, if you haven't joined, you can go to Camille's new portal that she built. Click on that button. It will take you to builtonair.com/join, and we'll get you in our Built on Air community to join thousands of other Airtable users and fans, and lots of daily conversations going on. So join us at builtonair.com/join. All right, Ali, teach us the new synced linked records.
All right. Okay. So one point of interest, I am still getting the hang of this. It's not as straightforward as I had expected it to be. I mean, it is in some ways, but so I'm going to show two examples. And Airtable also breaks these out within their support documentation. You might have existing bases set up that you've got two tables syncing into a new destination base, and maybe you want to now take advantage of this new feature. So kind of like up convert what your already existing setup is. We'll look at that quickly, and then we'll look at just from scratch if you were doing today with these new features. So right now I've got an existing base set up with my opportunities table and the interactions table, both being synced into this other base. And previous to this new feature, I would always use the same kind of methodology where I'd sync over the record ID from the source base of whatever the record is I want to link to. And then I'd use an automation, and I'd use a roll up to be like, am I linked to the correct record, right? So this interaction record I know should be linked to this opportunity's record ID. It is linked to a opportunity here. If I were to wipe this out, now this formula knows that there's something wrong, and the automation then just goes and fixes it and finds the correct opportunity to link it back up. So that's how the functionality is currently working in this base. If I want to take advantage of the new feature, I'm going to have to do a couple things. So in my source base. I'm going to go to both my tables here. And also, just best practice is always to create a separate view when you're syncing something. I like to name it with a little gear and a lightning bolt saying, you know, this is a synced view. So that way anybody else that's in here, and I also lock it when I'm done. I keep it locked so nobody can accidentally come in here and change these filters. But on this view, I currently don't have the field that's linking from opportunities to interactions. So I'm going to add that. So I'm going to add my interactions field here. And then I'm going to go to my interactions table and I'm going to add the reciprocal, so the opportunity field there. Now, when I go into my existing base here, things should already have synced up, and I've got this field called opportunity. Kind of funny. This is one thing I've noticed is that you can now have double field names. It's really weird. In all my testing, I've found sometimes when it brings this field in, it puts a 2 after it. Sometimes it doesn't. I have no idea why. I'm just going to call this new, just so we don't have the same field name twice. And you can see there's this new little blue dot, and that is indicating like, hey, this is actually a linked record field, and it knows that we have the table that it's linking to in this database. So we can click on it and it'll say convert to linked records. Now, if I had this linked record field in here and I did not have the opportunities table, I believe I'd still see this blue dot and it would prompt me like, hey, you could pull in your opportunities table and use this to link to it as well. So it is smart enough to just know that like this is a linked record field and it knows whether or not what it's trying to link to is here in this database or not. If I choose convert to linked records, it's going to say this cannot be undone. And I'm going to go ahead and say connect. Takes a second. At first, I freaked out. I was like, what's going on? Why? But then it populates. And there we go. I have tested adding duplicative values. So if you hopefully all your records are named uniquely, but if they're not, that shouldn't be an issue with this feature. It knows, I think it goes off of record ID, not off of the name, which is what I would expect, but I did verify. Now, here's the part that I am a little lost on, and I can't find anything in the documentation around it. If I now go to my opportunities table, I would expect to see the reciprocal of this new linked field on my opportunities table. I do not. It's not there. So theoretically, I guess you could just stop there, but I wouldn't. I would come here and finish that loop up. So I'm going to, again, go to that interactions field, and I'm going to rename it to new because it came in with the same name, and convert it to link to the interactions table. It's all going to go away, but then it should come back. There we go. Excellent. Now, when I click on one of these, just like in the source base, I'm still seeing this little white line saying, yep, this is a record on the interactions table, which is great. And then what I would do from that point on is try and move all of my dependencies from my old linked record field to my new linked record field. One thing I have noticed as well is on this new linked record field, it's going to say there are no dependencies, which I haven't quite figured out why that is, because this theoretically is a linked record field linking to the interactions table. Therefore, I would expect opportunity new, this other linked record field, to be its dependent field. Not really sure what's going on under the hood there yet. Still need to learn, but I would right click on my old interactions field and then just kind of move all the interactions or all the dependencies for this to my new one. And then you could ultimately phase this one out.
Does the, I can't remember, Oh yeah.
Any questions?
So there it's showing the dependency. But
what were you saying?
I was saying, yeah, this dependency. So it shows it on the old one, but not the new one. That's interesting.
That's bizarre.
Not the new one. If I were to add, it's really weird, right? But if I added a lookup now, like let's just say we're going to get the interaction types, and now I click and look at the dependencies, it will show that lookup, but it's not showing the reciprocal on the opportunities table. It's like they're disconnected. Like you can hook one side up and leave the other side not hooked up.
Right.
I feel like ideally when you make that selection on either one of the two linked fields, what I'm about to say is probably going to be annoying, but I think would be a stronger implementation is, let's say when you synced in your linked record fields from the source, you only synced in the linked record from the interactions table and not opportunities. Rather than letting you convert that to a linked record, I would prefer if it said, when you do this, we're going to make sure that its reciprocal field is added to the sync, to the opportunities, to make sure that both sides of the equation are present, and then converts them both and then links them together, or like you would with any other linked record field. It to me, it's very confusing that they're not connected in that way, even though they're connected by proxy. It's not, you want to see that in your dependencies. And then Kavan, who's been on the show previously, has a trick for if you don't have the access to the dependency checker by right-clicking a field. If you right-click and delete a field, it will give you a confirmation window if there are any dependencies. So like, if you want to play fast and loose, you will always get this modal. So if you desperately need to see if there are dependencies, or there are dependencies and you can't remember like if there's additional ones, that's one way to do it if you don't have access to the dependency thing.
Exactly. Yep. For linked record fields, you can, if you attempt to delete one, actually, because this one doesn't say that there are any dependencies. Well, it won't let me delete it because it's a synced field. So that actually, but you could, oh, and no, you can't, there's no configuration settings you can do on this new linked record field. That is one of the, what's the word? My brain just limitations. Thank you. And like dynamic filtering is not inherited. You can't do this with any fields like we were talking about earlier. If you're doing a self-linking field on the same table, that is not supported. When you switch over, it won't do that. So there's a couple little gotchas. But I do like, you can right click and say add lookup field still. It does function the same way. Now, if I were starting from scratch, there's still a couple things that I don't really understand why they made these decisions, but I'm going to just duplicate and say, a new one for each table here. I'm going to create new views and sync these new views into a new base. But here is where the weirdness is. So if I hide this field and go into my share settings here, so I'm going to enable this view to be synced. If I allow it to be synced, this synced linked tables thing, it's going to say there are 0 tables linked, and that's because I don't have that linked record field in this view. If I go and put it in this view, now it's going to say 1 of 1 tables are syncable, and it's going to say, okay, this opportunity field is a linked record field, and it wants you to pick a default view on your opportunities, or on my opportunities table, but the one I just created is not available yet because I haven't enabled it to be synced. So I'm going to go do that. And again, 0 table is linked. So it does know, what's on this view and if it's linked to another table. But as soon as I add that linked record field, now it's like, okay, this is syncable. This default view, I have not been able to figure out what it does. Like, I've set this up in here. I set it up in the other table to say, okay, now I want this to go to my new view, but I don't feel like it actually does anything. I think you can change it later on in the destination. So that's a question mark for me. And the help article, the support stuff is not helpful. It tells you you can do that. And then it's like, okay, now go and create the tables in the other base. But it doesn't actually bring those connections with it, which is really strange. So what I've found, like if I actually say, sync this view and go into their built-in wizard, those changes in the linked records that I did, nothing's going to come with it. It like skips a step. So I do not recommend using that built-in wizard. I would instead, let's just go here and copy the link after you've set up the ability to sync. And now if I go to the base that I want to add these tables to and click my add or import button and say from Airtable base and just paste in that link. This I find pretty clean. If I go to next, so now it's like, all right, do you want to also sync in the interactions? And so this is where, that default view setup, it defaulted to this, but I can now change it. So you don't really even need to set the default view because you have to pick it again once you sync it in over here, which is just weird to me. But if I leave this checked and hit next, it's going to add not only the opportunities table, but also the
We lost her.
Oh no.
You're back. You're back.
Okay. Where did you lose me?
Just a second ago, just in creating this new one.
Okay, great. So if you, once you hit create, it does add both of those tables. So it knows it's like they're kind of a package deal. And they come in already linked together. But again, no dependency.
That makes even less sense to me. I can kind of see it the first way you did it, where you independently turned on convert this into link record. I can see them making a decision. Well, maybe they don't want the other one to be linked for whatever reason. Yeah. If it comes in fresh as both of them linking to the opposing table, then they should be dependent on each other. It's very odd that they're not.
It's very odd. And to make it even more confusing, I experimented with syncing in more than just these two tables, right? Because in my source base, I have my interactions table, and it's not only linked to opportunities, but it's also linked to a contact. I could not get it to bring in all three tables and have them all linked together. Like, even though I configured everything and set it up so that they should be, one of those fields was still not converted every time, and I'd have to go in and reconvert it. It's very weird. But if you're dealing with something simple and it's just these two tables, that it does work nicely. And then the kicker of all of it that's really nice is if I go into my settings for those views and allow edits, and then I want to allow creating new records. And I guess I could just do that on both. You don't need to, but now I can go and on my interactions table. Oh, I need to also set up on this side editing. So I turn this on both screens. And now I can like hit the plus and create a new interaction. And I've been noticing this. It hasn't been popping open automatically sometimes. But if I just say, you know, this is new, doesn't matter. Let's just say now. And then if I go back into my interactions table in the source, there's that new one that I added. And it came from that synced base, which is awesome.
That is cool.
Yeah, I'm very into that.
Very good. Did I read that there's like a limitation on the number of like linked records you can have that's like lower than the number of actual records you could have? I feel like I saw that somewhere.
I have not seen.
There is some kind of limit. I forget what it is. But yeah, I do remember there being some kind of limit listed somewhere.
And go down in the FAQ. Integration limits, sync integration limits.
Where's that?
In the FAQ, the third one. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, if we find it, we'll share. Let's see.
Managing when over limits.
It doesn't say what the limits are.
Yeah. Yeah, I am not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I thought somebody was like, "Oh, we can't use it yet because it has a limit on the number of synced records or something."
You can't do it. Does not support multi-sources. So if you have two different sources coming into the same table, like syncing into the same table, the linked records does not work.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily surprise me. I guess Airtable wouldn't know what record to add to, like which of the two sources should this new record come in as.
Exactly.
But. All right, well, let's wrap things up. Jen had to jump off, but want to thank Jen for joining us, and thank you for another great season of Built on Air. We'll be off for the month of September, and we'll be back in October for season 20. Excited for that. See everybody in a bit.
Thank you.
Close with that guy and end stream.